I walked into Checkmated Solutions on a Tuesday morning after 17 years of loyalty, expecting just another day. Instead, CEO Jason Hartwell called me into his corner office with a smug grin plastered across his face. He told me I was being terminated effective immediately, that younger talent was the future. He gestured lazily toward the door behind me and said the exit was that way. I smiled calmly, walked back to my desk, shut off my office lights, grabbed my personal plant, and left the building without a word. By noon, my phone showed 85 missed calls. The company founder was screaming about why their $900 million software platform had completely stopped working. I sat in my car in the parking garage, staring at my phone as it vibrated continuously against the console. Call after call, text after text, all from numbers I recognized, numbers that had ignored me for years unless they needed something fixed. Now they needed me desperately, and that realization settled into my chest like a warm stone. Let me take you back 17 years. I was 23 years old, fresh out of graduate school with a computer science degree and more ambition than common sense. I had started freelancing because no one wanted to hire a young woman without experience, even though my thesis on predictive algorithms had won awards. So I worked alone in my tiny studio apartment in downtown Portland, surviving on instant ramen and cold pizza, teaching myself advanced programming languages at 3 a.m. That is when Douglas Brennan found me. He was starting a company called Checkmated Solutions with a handful of investors and one very ambitious young executive named Jason Hartwell. They needed customer relationship management software that could do something revolutionary, something that could predict customer behavior patterns before the customers themselves knew what they wanted. They had big dreams but a small budget. They hired me as a contractor. I spent 8 months alone in that apartment, building something from nothing. My fingers flew across the keyboard for 12, sometimes 16 hours a day. I created algorithms that wove together data points in ways no one had considered before. I built a platform that could learn, adapt, and anticipate. It was beautiful in the way that only code can be beautiful, elegant, and efficient, and powerful. When I delivered the finished product, Douglas and Jason were stunned. They had expected good work. What I gave them was genius. They hired me full-time immediately, offering me a salary of $45,000 a year plus benefits. I was so grateful. I had health insurance for the first time since graduating. I had a desk, colleagues, stability. I felt like I had finally made it. They promised to handle all the paperwork, all the formalities. There was an intellectual property transfer agreement drafted up by their lawyers. I remember sitting in the conference room, reading through the dense legal language, trying to understand what it meant. Douglas assured me it was standard, that everyone signed these documents, that it protected both me and the company. He told me to take my time reviewing it, to have a lawyer look at it if I wanted. But I was 23 and naive, and so desperately grateful for the opportunity. I told them I would sign it after I had a chance to read it more carefully. Then the company exploded with growth. Within 3 months, we had our first 100 clients. Within 6 months, we had 1,000. Everyone was working 80-hour weeks. The office was chaos. Beautiful, productive chaos. Signing that agreement got pushed to the back burner. Everyone forgot about it in the rush of success. Everyone except me. My father had been a contract worker his whole life, a carpenter who learned the hard way to document everything, to keep copies, to never trust that paperwork would get handled properly. Before he died when I was 19, he gave me a safety deposit box and made me promise to keep copies of every important document I ever signed. So I kept my original contractor agreement. I kept all my source code documentation. I kept the unsigned IP transfer agreement in that box, along with the correspondence showing they had drafted it, but never followed through. Over the next 17 years, I built my life around Checkmated. I started as a junior developer and worked my way up to director of software development. I hired teams, mentored young programmers, improved the platform continuously. I watched the company grow from 12 people in a cramped office to 400 employees across 3 buildings. I saw our client list expand to 40,000 corporations. I attended meetings where they discussed our valuation climbing to $900 million. I loved my job. I loved the people. I loved knowing that the thing I had built in my tiny apartment was now helping businesses all over the country make better decisions, connect with their customers, grow and thrive. I never thought about that unsigned agreement. Well, that is not entirely true. 5 years ago, I was having coffee with a friend from law school. I mentioned the story casually, laughing about the chaos of those early days. She stopped laughing and asked if I was serious. When I confirmed that yes, I had never signed the IP transfer, she made me promise to consult with an attorney. I did. The lawyer told me plainly that I technically still owned the foundational code that the entire platform was built upon. Everything added later belonged to the company, but the core architecture, the predictive algorithms, the fundamental structure that made everything else possible, that was still legally mine. He advised me to address it, to either sign the agreement or renegotiate terms, but I did not. I trusted Douglas. I trusted the company. I had a good salary by then. $120,000 a year. A team I loved. Projects that challenged me. Why rock the boat? Why create problems where none existed? Until this morning, when Jason Hartwell fired me, he did not give me a reason beyond that vague comment about younger talent. I knew the real reason, though. Last month, I had questioned some financial reports that did not make sense, client retention numbers that seemed inflated, revenue projections that did not match the data I was seeing in the system. I had sent an email to Eric Walsh, our CFO, asking for clarification. I copied Jason as a courtesy. Jason called me into his office that same day and told me to stay in my lane. He said financial strategy was above my pay grade. He said I should focus on code and stop worrying about numbers. His tone was dismissive, almost contemptuous. I backed off because I needed my job. I had a mortgage, car payments, a life built around this company. But Jason never forgot. And apparently, he decided I was a threat. So he fired me. And in doing so, he made the biggest mistake of his professional life. Because what Jason did not know, what no one at TechVantage remembered except possibly Douglas, was that the software they depended on, the platform that generated all their revenue, the technology that justified their $900 million valuation, was not actually theirs. It was mine. And now I was sitting in my car, watching my phone light up with increasingly frantic calls, and I was deciding what to do about it. I drove home to my apartment in Northwest Portland, carried my plant inside, and made myself a cup of tea. Earl Grey, hot, with honey. I sat down at my kitchen table, opened my laptop, and logged into the system remotely using my personal credentials that still worked because IT had not processed my termination yet. The system logs told me exactly what I needed to know. Authentication failure cascading through every module. Security protocols locking down one subsystem after another. Client portals going dark. Data access freezing. It was not a crash. It was much more elegant than that. 7 years ago, TechVantage experienced a data breach scare. Nothing actually happened, but the threat was real enough that the executive team demanded we implement additional security measures. I proposed a multi-factor executive verification system that would require biometric authentication from key personnel to verify system integrity every 72 hours. It sounded impressive and secure. Jason and Eric approved it without asking too many questions because they did not understand the technical details. What I did not tell them was that my biometric signature was the master key. My fingerprint, my retinal pattern, my voice print, all encoded into the system's core security architecture. Every 72 hours, I would scan my finger on my office terminal, usually without even thinking about it. The system would verify my identity and continue running smoothly. When Jason fired me this morning, security revoked my building access immediately. Standard procedure. That meant I could not access my office terminal, which meant I could not provide the biometric authentication, which meant the 72-hour window that had started Saturday morning ran out at exactly 11:42 this morning, and the entire platform went into lockdown mode. I sipped my tea and watched the logs scroll across my screen. 40,000 companies locked out of their customer data, sales teams unable to access leads, marketing departments cut off from campaign analytics, customer service representatives staring at blank screens. And every minute that passed, TechVantage was bleeding money and credibility. My phone rang again. Tanya Rodriguez, my best friend at the company, a senior developer I had hired 6 years ago and mentored ever since. I answered. Caitlin, oh my God, what is happening? Everything is down, every single system, 40,000 clients are locked out. Jason is having an absolute meltdown in the conference room. Eric looks like he is going to have a heart attack. Where are you? They said you were fired? That cannot be right. I could hear the genuine distress in Tanya's voice, and I felt a pang of guilt. Tanya had nothing to do with this. None of my team did. They were good people doing good work, and they were about to get caught in the crossfire. It is right. Jason fired me this morning, effective immediately. Said younger talent was the future. What? Why? That makes no sense. You built this entire company. Half the staff learned everything they know from you. This is insane. I agree. But that is what happened. Caitlin, do you know what is wrong with the system? Can you fix it remotely? I took another sip of tea. The system is working exactly as designed, Tanya. It is just not designed to work without me. There was a long pause. I could hear the sounds of chaos in the background, people shouting, phones ringing off the hook. What does that mean? It means I need to think about what comes next. I will call you later. I hung up before she could respond. 2 minutes later, my phone rang again. Douglas Brennan, the founder. I had not spoken to him directly in almost 3 years. He had gradually stepped back from daily operations, spending more time at his vacation home in Bend, trusting Jason to run the company. Now his voice on the phone sounded strained and old. Caitlin, I just heard what happened. This is a terrible misunderstanding. Jason acted without consulting me. He had no authority to terminate you. We need you back immediately. A misunderstanding, I repeated flatly. That is an interesting way to describe being fired. Please, the clients are threatening to leave. We are losing millions of dollars every hour. I do not understand what is happening with the system, but I know you can fix it. Just come back. We will make this right. What does making it right look like, Douglas? Whatever you want. Severance pay, extended benefits, a formal apology. I will talk to Jason myself. Just please, come back and fix this. I thought about it. I could go back, restore the system, take a nice severance package, and walk away. That would be the safe choice, the easy choice. But as I sat there holding my phone, I realized I did not want easy. I wanted justice. I will come in tomorrow morning to assess the situation. But Douglas, before I do anything, we are going to have a very serious conversation about how this company has been run and what happens next. Are we clear? Yes. Absolutely. Whatever you need. Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you so much. He hung up. I set my phone down and walked to my bedroom closet. I pulled out a small box from the top shelf, opened it, and removed a key. Then I drove to my bank. The safety deposit box was exactly where my father had set it up for me 15 years ago. Inside were documents I had not looked at in years. Birth certificate, college transcripts, the deed to my apartment, and there, in a manila folder, the unsigned intellectual property transfer agreement from 17 years ago. I took photographs of every page with my phone, every clause, every signature line that should have had my name on it but remained blank. Back home, I sent the photos to my personal attorney, a woman named Grace Chen who I had hired 5 years ago for estate planning. I explained the situation in a brief email. She called me 20 minutes later. Caitlin, this is extraordinary. You understand what this means. I think so, but tell me clearly. You own the foundational code, the core platform. Everything they have built on top of it belongs to them, but the architecture underneath, the essential algorithms that make it all work, those are yours. Legally, unambiguously yours, and if they try to use it without my permission, then they are infringing on your intellectual property. You have grounds for a lawsuit that would make their current crisis look like a minor inconvenience. I smiled for the first time that day. Good. That is very good. We talked for another hour, discussing strategy, leverage, and what I actually wanted from this situation. By the time I hung up, I had a plan. Not just to fix the software, not just to get my job back, but to fix everything that was broken about TechVantage Solutions. That evening, Word spread through the company about what had happened to me. I started getting messages from coworkers. Some were angry that I had been fired. Others were confused. A few were clearly worried about their own jobs. I responded to none of them. I needed everyone to understand that this was bigger than office politics or personal grievances. This was about who actually built what and who got to control it. I slept well that night, better than I had in months. I woke up at 6 a.m, showered, and put on my best suit. Navy blue, tailored, professional. I wanted to walk back into that building looking like someone who held all the cards. Because I did. I arrived at TechVantage headquarters at 8 o'clock. The parking lot was fuller than usual for this early in the morning. People coming in on a crisis schedule, trying to manage the disaster. I walked through the front doors and immediately felt the tension. The normally cheerful lobby receptionist looked exhausted. 2 executives rushed past me without making eye contact, talking frantically into their phones. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor where the executive offices were located. Employees I passed looked relieved to see me. A few tried to stop me to ask questions, but I kept walking. Tanya was standing near my old office, her arms crossed, her face tight with worry. "Be careful," she mouthed as I walked by. I was escorted to the main executive conference room by Douglas' assistant, a nervous young man who kept apologizing for the situation even though he had nothing to do with it. The conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Willamette River. Normally, it was a beautiful view. Today, it felt like a fishbowl. Douglas was already there, sitting at the head of the long table. He looked like he had aged 5 years overnight. His usually neat silver hair was disheveled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. Eric Walsh, the CFO, sat to his right, looking furious but trying to maintain a professional expression. 2 other board members were present, Sandra Yates and Martin Shaw. Jason Hartwell arrived 15 minutes late, on his phone, barely glancing at me as he sat down. He was talking to someone about damage control and public relations strategy. He ended the call and looked at Douglas expectantly. "Let us get started. Caitlin, thank you for coming in. We need you to restore system access immediately. Every hour that passes costs us money and reputation." I opened my laptop calmly, connected to the Wi-Fi, and pulled up my notes. Before we discuss that, I need to understand the decision-making process that led to my termination yesterday. Walk me through it. Jason's jaw tightened. "That is irrelevant. We have a crisis to manage. It is entirely relevant to me." Douglas intervened, his voice tired but sincere. "Caitlin, Jason made a personnel decision that I was not consulted on. It was a mistake. We want to reinstate you with full back pay for yesterday, plus a 20% raise and a formal apology. Will that satisfy you?" "What about my team? I heard there are plans for layoffs in the engineering department." Jason's face flushed. "That is confidential executive strategy. You have no right to that information." I closed my laptop. "Then I have nothing more to discuss. Thank you for your time." I stood up to leave. The room erupted. Eric slammed his hand on the table. "This is corporate sabotage. You are deliberately holding the system hostage." Douglas stood up, holding his hands out. "Everyone calm down. Caitlin, please, sit down. Let us talk about this reasonably." I remained standing. "I will sit down when you agree that there will be no layoffs in any department for at least 6 months. My team did nothing wrong. They should not pay the price for executive dysfunction." Douglas looked at Jason, who looked like he wanted to argue. Finally, Douglas said, "Fine, no layoffs for 6 months." "Agreed. Put it in writing." Sandra Yates, the chief legal counsel, pulled out her laptop and started typing. 5 minutes later, she slid a printed document across the table. I read it carefully, confirmed it, said what I needed it to say, and then sat down. "Now we can begin." I opened my laptop and started running diagnostics, pulling up system logs, reviewing error reports. I made notes, asked a few technical questions that only I would know the answers to. I wanted to look like I was genuinely trying to fix the problem. And I was, in a way. I was just fixing more than they realized. After 20 minutes, I closed my laptop. I need to access the main server room directly. Remote diagnostics are not sufficient for this level of system failure. Douglas authorized it immediately. Jason smirked, thinking his plan was working. I left the conference room and headed down to the basement level where the servers were housed. What Jason did not know, what none of them knew, was that I had already overheard something I was not supposed to hear. On my way to the restroom, I had passed by a smaller conference room on the second floor. The glass walls were slightly tinted but not opaque. Inside, I saw 4 people I did not recognize, surrounded by laptops and technical equipment. One of them I did recognize, though, from his picture in tech industry publications, Marcus Sutherland, a notorious codebreaker from Silicon Valley. Companies hired him for hostile takeovers, corporate espionage, and breaking into secured systems. I stopped walking, pulled out my phone, and pretended to take a call. I stood just close enough to hear their conversation through the door, which was slightly ajar. We are 3 hours from full access. Once we are in, we change all admin credentials immediately, lock her out completely, and restore client access ourselves. That was Marcus' voice, confident and cold. Then I heard Jason's voice coming through a speakerphone. And the legal angle. We have her arrested for sabotage the second she restores access. Unauthorized system modification, corporate espionage, whatever sticks. She will be too tied up in legal battles to fight the IP claim. By the time she clears her name, if she ever does, we will have completely rewritten the foundational code and she will have no leverage. Eric's voice came through next. This is extremely risky. If this backfires, we could face serious legal consequences. It is necessary. Jason's voice was hard. We pay her nothing, we keep everything, and we make an example. No employee will ever threaten this company again. I felt my blood turn to ice. They were not just trying to fix the system without me. They were planning to have me arrested, to destroy my reputation, to steal my work and pretend it never belonged to me in the first place. I walked quickly back toward the executive wing, my mind racing. I found Douglas' assistant and told him I had changed my mind about the server room approach. Instead, I needed to access the system from a secure terminal in the executive IT office. He looked confused but approved it. In the IT office, I locked the door and went to work, but I was not restoring access. I was protecting myself. I initiated a complete data migration protocol, something I had built years ago for disaster recovery. Every client database, every user agreement, every system log, every piece of evidence of what TechVantage actually was and who had built it, all of it began transferring to an encrypted third-party cloud service I had set up under my personal account. It would take 4 hours to complete, but once finished, I would have an independent, legally admissible backup of everything. Then I composed an email, not to the company address, to Douglas' personal email, the one he used for his consulting work and personal business. The subject line read, "The truth about your software." I attached the photographs of the unsigned IP agreement, my original contractor agreement, and the legal analysis from my attorney. I explained in clear, simple terms that I owned the foundational code, that I had never transferred that ownership, that what Jason was doing was not just unethical, but potentially illegal. And I explained what I had just overheard about Marcus Sutherland and the plan to have me arrested. I ended the email with a simple statement. You have 24 hours to decide how this ends. You can do the right thing, or you can find out what happens when you push someone who has nothing left to lose. I hit send. Then I stood up, walked out of the building, past security who tried to stop me but could not legally hold me since I was not technically an employee anymore, and drove home. My phone started ringing before I even made it to the highway. Douglas. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. And again. I turned off my phone. I went home, changed into comfortable clothes, and waited. 2 hours later, there was a knock on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw Douglas Brennan standing there alone, looking devastated. I opened the door. We need to talk, he said. Douglas sat at my kitchen table while I made coffee. He looked like a man who had just discovered his entire life was built on sand. His hands shook slightly as he accepted the mug from me. I have been blind. I am so sorry, Caitlin. I trusted Jason completely. I thought I could retire gradually, leave the company in good hands, and everything would continue the way it was supposed to. What did you find? He pulled out his phone and showed me documents his attorney had compiled over the last 3 hours. Financial statements, revenue projections, client retention metrics. Jason has been systematically inflating our numbers. Revenue projections that do not match actual contracts signed. Client cancellations that never made it into the official reports. Payment defaults that got hidden in accounting footnotes. The $900 million valuation we have been celebrating is based on fraudulent growth metrics. Our real value is probably closer to $400 million, and that is being generous. I felt dizzy. I had suspected something was wrong when I questioned those reports last month, but I had not imagined it was this extensive. How long has this been going on? At least 2 years. Maybe longer. He was planning to take the company public next quarter based on these inflated numbers. He would have cashed out his stock options for tens of millions of dollars and disappeared before anyone realized the truth. And I was fired because I asked questions. Yes. You were the only person with both the technical knowledge and the access to see the discrepancies. He saw you as a threat to his entire scheme. Douglas set down his phone and looked at me directly. I am calling an emergency board meeting tomorrow morning. I need you there. I need your documentation, your evidence, everything. We are going to fix this. The right way. What about Marcus Sutherland and his team? I fired them 90 minutes ago. Security escorted them out of the building. Jason does not know yet. He has been in client calls all afternoon trying to do damage control. I studied Douglas carefully. He looked sincere. But I had been burned by trust before. I will come, but only with my attorney present. And Douglas, I need you to understand something. This cannot go back to how it was. The culture that allowed this to happen, the structure that let one person have this much unchecked power, it all has to change. I know. And it will. I promise you. The next morning, I arrived at TechVantage headquarters at 8:30. Grace Chen, my attorney, walked beside me. We were escorted to the main boardroom on the executive floor. All 9 board members were present, sitting around the massive oak table. Douglas sat at the head. Jason sat 3 seats down, looking confident despite everything. He had no idea what was coming. Douglas called the meeting to order. We are here to address serious concerns about company governance and financial practices. I have asked Caitlin Harper to join us, along with her legal counsel. Jason's confident expression faltered slightly. Why does she need a lawyer? And why is she here at all? She is not an employee. That is one of the things we need to discuss. Douglas opened his laptop and projected financial documents onto the screen behind him. For the next 30 minutes, he methodically dismantled Jason's house of cards. Every inflated projection, every hidden cancellation, every manipulated metric. The room grew increasingly tense. Jason tried to deflect. This is a misunderstanding of standard accounting practices. Every company smooths out quarterly fluctuations. This is completely normal. Sandra Yates, the chief legal counsel, shook her head. This goes far beyond smoothing fluctuations. This is securities fraud. If we had gone public based on these numbers, we would all be facing federal charges. Then Douglas dropped the second bomb. He pulled up bank records showing payments from a Jason-controlled LLC to 3 board members, Martin Shaw, Patricia Hendricks, and Tom Ridgefield, consulting fees totaling $600,000 over 2 years. These payments were made in exchange for rubber stamping Jason's decisions without proper oversight. These 3 board members violated their fiduciary duties and enabled this fraud. The room exploded into chaos. Martin stood up, shouting about improper procedures. Patricia tried to claim the payments were legitimate consulting work. Tom sat frozen, his face white. Jason played his final card. He stood up, pointing at me. You want to talk about fraud? She sabotaged our system. She deliberately crashed the platform to extort the company. That is corporate terrorism. Grace Chen stood smoothly. My client did no such thing. The system is functioning exactly as designed. A system, I might add, that she legally owns. She pulled out printed copies of the unsigned IP agreement and handed them to each board member. 17 years ago, TechVantage Solutions hired Caitlin Harper as a contractor to build their core platform. They drafted an intellectual property transfer agreement but never had her sign it. That means the foundational code, The algorithms that make your entire business possible legally belong to Miss Harper, not to TechVantage. The silence was deafening. Every board member was reading the documents, their faces registering shock and horror. Jason's face went from red to white. That is impossible. That code belongs to the company. She was an employee. She was a contractor first. And the IP transfer never happened, which means any claim that she sabotaged company property is baseless. She has every legal right to control her own intellectual property. Jason looked around the room desperately, realizing he had lost. He tried one more approach. Fine, I made some mistakes. I will resign quietly. No investigation, no criminal charges, and we all move on. Douglas stood up, and I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before. Pure, cold fury. You destroyed the company I spent 30 years building. You betrayed every person who trusted you. You put hundreds of jobs at risk. You were willing to send an innocent woman to jail to cover your crimes. He paused. No, you do not get to walk away, the board voted. Jason Hartwell terminated for cause, effective immediately. Full investigation into financial fraud. Cooperation with federal authorities if necessary. The 3 compromised board members, Martin Shaw, Patricia Hendricks, and Tom Ridgefield, forced to resign immediately and repay all consulting fees. Security was called. 2 guards entered the boardroom. Jason looked at me as they escorted him out, his eyes filled with hatred and humiliation. I met his gaze calmly. I had won. After he was gone, Douglas turned to the remaining board members. We have to address the other issue. The IP ownership. Caitlin has every legal right to shut us down permanently. We need to negotiate a resolution. Sandra Yates nodded. The company's entire value is based on software we do not actually own. This is an existential crisis. Douglas looked at me. What do you want, Caitlin? And please, be honest. You have earned the right to ask for anything. I took a deep breath. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The remaining 6 board members looked at me with a mixture of hope and fear. I glanced at Grace, who gave me a subtle nod of encouragement. Before we discuss what I want, let me be clear about what I do not want. I do not want revenge. I do not want to destroy the company or hurt the people who depend on it. Despite everything that has happened, I still believe in what TechVantage was supposed to be. Douglas looked relieved. Eric Walsh, the CFO, leaned forward. Then what do you propose? I need to understand the full scope of the crisis first. Eric, give me the honest numbers. How bad is it? Eric pulled up a spreadsheet on his laptop, his expression grim. With Jason's fraud exposed and the system outage, we are in serious trouble. We have maybe 3 weeks of operating capital. Client defections are accelerating. Major investors are demanding their money back. Our private share value has dropped 40% in the last 24 hours. Several key employees have already started sending out resumes. What about client sentiment? Mixed. Some are sympathetic, especially after we explained the executive misconduct, but most are just scared. They have built their entire business operations around our platform. They need stability, and right now we cannot give them that. Sandra Yates added, we are also facing potential lawsuits from investors who feel they were misled about the company's valuation. Even though the board was largely in the dark, we still have fiduciary liability. I processed all of this information. The company I had helped build was on the verge of collapse, not because the technology was bad, but because the leadership had been corrupt, and now I had the power to either save it or let it die. Douglas spoke quietly. Caitlin, we have one undeniable asset, your software, and you. If you are willing to stay, to lead our technical operations, we can rebuild trust with our clients. We can stabilize the company, but we cannot do it without you. Board member Sandra continued, I propose we offer you a significant equity stake and an executive position, make you Chief Technology Officer, give you 15% equity in the company, a salary of $350,000 plus performance bonuses, and full autonomy over all technical operations. I sat back, considering 15% of a company currently valued at maybe $400 million. That was $60 million on paper, though the real value was uncertain given the crisis. The salary was nearly triple what I had been making. It was an incredible offer, but it was not enough. I need to speak with my attorney privately. Grace and I stepped into an empty conference room down the hall. She closed the door and smiled. That is an extraordinary offer. If you accept, you will be set for life. Even if the company struggles, that equity stake is substantial. I walked to the window, looking out at the city. But what about everyone else? What about Tanya and the team that stuck with me through everything? What about the junior developers who are living paycheck to paycheck? What about the original mission of this company? Caitlin, you cannot save everyone. You have to think about yourself. I have been thinking about myself my whole career. That is what Jason accused me of yesterday, right before he fired me. Maybe it is time to think bigger. I turned back to face her. I am going to make a counteroffer. A big one. We returned to the boardroom 5 minutes later. The board members looked hopeful. I sat down and opened my laptop, pulling up notes I had been making. Here are my terms. I want 25% equity in the company, non-dilutable. I want 3 of my senior team members promoted to C-suite positions, including Tanya Rodriguez as Vice President of Engineering. I want an employee profit-sharing program implemented immediately, with at least 5% of annual profits distributed to staff based on tenure and performance. I want a guarantee of no layoffs for 1 full year, not 6 months. And I want Douglas to remain as chairman of the board for at least 3 more years to provide continuity and oversight. Eric looked like he might faint. 25%? That is massive dilution for existing shareholders. The existing shares are worth nothing if the company fails, which it will, without me. So really, I am offering you a chance to own 75% of something instead of 100% of nothing. Sandra spoke up. The board needs to discuss this privately. These are major structural changes. Of course, take your time. But before they could ask us to leave, Douglas' phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, and his face went pale. We have a problem. A big one. He turned his phone screen to face the room. It was an email from Helen Cartwright, CEO of Global Tech Industries. Global Tech was TechVantage's single largest client, representing 30% of annual revenue. The email was short and brutal. Douglas, I am hearing disturbing reports about executive misconduct and system instability at TechVantage. Global Tech needs assurance that our data is secure and that your platform will remain operational. I am requesting an immediate call with your Chief Technology Officer, Caitlin Harper, to discuss the situation. If I cannot speak with Ms. Harper personally, and if she is not leading your technical operations, Global Tech will begin transitioning to an alternative provider. We cannot risk our business on an unstable partnership. You have 24 hours to respond. Douglas set down his phone. We are not the only ones. I just received similar messages from 4 other major clients while you were out of the room. They all want to know if Caitlin is staying, if she is in charge. They do not trust anyone else to protect their data after what happened with Jason. I showed the email to the board. It is not just about the software anymore. It is about trust. Your clients trust me. Your employees trust me. The question is, do you? The room was silent for a long moment. Then Douglas spoke. Give her everything she is asking for, all of it. Eric started to protest. Douglas, the dilution alone will cut your personal stake by nearly 40%. I would rather own 50% of a living company than 80% of a dead one. We vote now. Sandra called for a formal vote. The terms were clear. 25% equity for Caitlin. Promotions for her team. Profit-sharing program. 1-year layoff protection. Douglas remaining as chairman. 6 board members. 6 votes in favor. Unanimous. Sandra began drafting the agreement immediately. We will have formal documents ready by end of business today. But Caitlin, we need you to commit to a minimum term. This cannot be a short-term arrangement. 5 years. I will stay for 5 years, but only if you implement one more thing. What? A new corporate value statement. Transparency, accountability, and respect for the people who do the work. I want it in writing, in every contract, in every employee handbook. I want it to mean something. Douglas smiled for the first time in days. Done. We shook hands across the table. It was not just a business agreement. It was a promise to do better, to be better. As I left the boardroom, I felt something I had not felt in years. Not just satisfaction or victory, but hope. Real hope that we could build something worth being proud of. Tanya was waiting in the hallway. She had clearly been listening at the door. "Did you just become part owner of this company?" "I did." She hugged me so hard I could barely breathe. "You are my hero. You know that, right?" I laughed. "I am just someone who kept good records and refused to be erased. Come on. We have work to do. We have to save this company. Together. Together." By 3 o'clock that afternoon, I had assembled my core technical team in the main development wing. Tanya Rodriguez, who would soon be Vice President of Engineering. James Kowalski, a systems architect I had hired 4 years ago straight out of Carnegie Mellon. Rachel Morgan, a brilliant database specialist who could make SQL queries sing. And Aidan Foster, a security expert I had poached from a failing startup 2 years back. They sat around the conference table looking exhausted but determined. The rest of the development staff watched through the glass walls, knowing something important was happening but not yet understanding what. I stood at the head of the table. "I am going to be completely honest with all of you because you deserve the truth. Jason Hartwell has been fired for financial fraud. 3 board members have resigned. The company is in crisis. But that crisis created an opportunity. As of this morning, I own 25% of TechVantage. I am the new Chief Technology Officer, and Tanya is now Vice President of Engineering." The room erupted. Congratulations mixed with shock, mixed with relief. James was laughing. Rachel had tears in her eyes. Aidan just nodded like he had known all along this was how it would end. When everyone settled down, I continued. "Here is what we need to do right now. We need to restore full system access. We need to communicate with every single client and reassure them that their data is safe, and we need to rebuild trust, starting immediately." "Are you with me?" 4 voices answered in unison. "Absolutely. Then let us get to work." I walked to my old workstation, which no one had dared to touch in the past day, and logged back into the system. My credentials still worked because I had never really left. I began inputting my biometric authentication protocols, telling the system I was back, I was present. Everything was under control. Subsystems began coming back online one by one. Client portals flickered to life, data access restored. The development floor erupted in applause as they watched the status boards turn from red to green. But then Aidan called out from his workstation, "Caitlin, I need you to look at something. Right now." I walked over. His screen showed server logs, lines of code that should not have been there. What am I looking at? I found this embedded in the core database modules. It is code I do not recognize, sophisticated, hidden deep in the architecture. Looks like it was added about 3 weeks ago. My stomach dropped. I leaned closer, tracing the logic pathways. It was malware, elegant, insidious malware designed to remain dormant until triggered. What does it do? Aidan worked through the code, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he unraveled its purpose. After 10 minutes, he went pale. It is a time-delayed data corruption protocol. It activates in stages over 6 months. Stage 1 starts in 3 weeks. By month 6, every client database would be systematically corrupted. Customer records, financial data, operational information, all of it would be destroyed so gradually that no one would notice until it was too late. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. Who wrote this? Aidan pulled up the code signature, a unique pattern every programmer leaves behind like a fingerprint. I recognized it immediately. Marcus Sutherland, the consultant Jason had hired. This was planted weeks before I was even fired. This was Jason's ultimate revenge plan. Even if everything else failed, even if he got caught and fired, he was going to destroy the company on his way out. Rachel came over to look at the code. "Can we remove it?" "I do not know yet. Give me time." I called Douglas immediately. Explained what we had found. He sounded like he might be sick. "How do we fix this?" "I am working on it." "But Douglas, this changes everything. If Jason planted this deliberately, this is not just fraud. This is attempted corporate sabotage on a massive scale. I will call our attorneys and the FBI. This has gone beyond civil matters. I hung up and turned back to my team. We are going to be here all night. Order pizza, get coffee, call your families and tell them you will be late. We are not leaving until this is fixed. They did not hesitate. They knew what was at stake. We worked through the evening and into the night. The office gradually emptied around us as other employees went home, but the development wing stayed lit up like a command center. Rachel mapped the malware's replication pattern across 40,000 client databases. James built a testing environment where we could experiment with removal protocols without risking real data. Aiden dove into Marcus' code, learning his techniques, understanding his logic, and I wrote an algorithm to hunt and eliminate every instance of the malware. At midnight, we ordered more pizza. At 2 a.m, we switched to energy drinks. At 3:15, I found a critical breakthrough. The malware had a central command structure, a master node that coordinated all the individual instances. If I could identify and neutralize that node, the rest would be vulnerable to removal. At 4:30, Tanya discovered the malware had a dead man's switch. If we tried to delete it improperly, it would trigger immediately and destroy everything we were trying to protect. I sat back in my chair, rubbing my eyes. So we have to reverse engineer Marcus' exact implementation, understand every failsafe, and execute a perfect removal protocol. If we make one mistake, we lose everything. James looked at the code on his screen. That could take weeks. We do not have weeks. Then we figure it out in hours. At 5:47 in the morning, I finally cracked it. I understood Marcus' logic, saw the elegant cruelty of his design, and found the single point of vulnerability he had left behind because even he needed a way to control his own weapon. I built a counter protocol that would speak the malware's own language, convince it that everything was functioning normally, and then systematically dismantle it from the inside. This is it. This is our shot. If it works, we save everything. If it fails, we trigger the corruption immediately and lose everything right now. Tanya put her hand on my shoulder. You have got this. You have always got this. I deployed the purge protocol at 5:53 in the morning. The system began processing. We watched progress bars crawl across our screens, percentages climbing with agonizing slowness. 1%, 5%, 12%. At 6:09, we hit a snag, an error message I had not anticipated. The malware was fighting back, trying to isolate itself, trying to preserve its core functions. I rewrote part of the algorithm on the fly, adapting to its responses, countering its defenses. At 6:31, the progress bars started moving again. 28%, 45%, 67%. At 6:52, we reached 99%. Then the system froze. The screen went blank. We all held our breath. And then, at 6:53 in the morning, every monitor in the development wing turned green. System clean. Malware eliminated. All client data verified intact. Full operational capacity restored. The 5 of us just sat there for a moment, too exhausted to celebrate. Then Tanya started laughing. Rachel joined her. James let out a whoop. Aiden smiled quietly. And I felt tears running down my face. We had done it. We had saved 40,000 companies from losing everything. We had protected data worth billions of dollars. We had defeated Jason's final act of malice. I sent a company-wide email at 7:04 in the morning. All systems fully restored. Malware threat eliminated. Client data verified secure. Crisis resolved. Thank you to everyone who stood by this company during the hardest 48 hours of our history. We are going to be okay. At 8:15, employees started arriving for the day and found the development team asleep at their workstations. Someone brought blankets, someone else made coffee. By 9:30, word had spread through the entire building. Caitlin and her team had worked through the night and saved everything. At 10 o'clock, I stood in the company cafeteria in front of 200 employees. I had not slept. I probably looked terrible. But I needed to say this while it mattered. I know you have all heard pieces of what happened over the last 2 days. Jason Hartwell is gone. The company is under new leadership. We faced a crisis that could have destroyed us. But we survived because of the people in this room. The developers who know this code inside and out. The support staff who kept clients calm. The operations team that kept everything running. You are what makes TechVantage real. Not the valuation. Not the executive titles. You. I paused, gathering my thoughts. I am not just talking to you as your new CTO. I am talking to you as someone who was fired 2 days ago. Someone who was told I did not matter. Someone who was supposed to disappear. But I did not disappear. Because I remembered what my father taught me. Keep good records. Know your worth. Never let anyone erase you. And I am here to tell you that every single person in this room matters. Your work matters. Your loyalty matters. And this company is going to prove that doing things right still works. The applause started slowly, then built into something overwhelming. People were standing, some crying, some laughing. This was not just about surviving a crisis. This was about reclaiming something we had lost. Dignity, purpose, hope. I walked back to the development wing with my team. Douglas was waiting there with the board members. They wanted to hold another press conference, to control the narrative before the media got hold of the story. I agreed, but only on one condition. We tell the truth. All of it, the fraud, the sabotage, everything. We own what happened and show people how we fixed it. That afternoon, TechVantage held a press conference. Douglas spoke first, explaining Jason's termination and the board's governance failures. I spoke second, describing the technical crisis and the malware threat. We were transparent, honest, and direct. The media response was overwhelmingly positive. Headlines praised the company's transparency. Clients expressed relief and renewed confidence. Competitors watched nervously, realizing TechVantage was not collapsing. We were transforming. Over the next week, we lost 2 minor clients who were too spooked by the crisis to stay. But we kept Global Tech. We kept every other major account. And we signed 3 new clients who specifically cited our honest handling of the situation as the reason they trusted us. I promoted Tanya officially. I brought 3 other senior developers into leadership roles. I implemented the profit-sharing program. And I started building the company culture I had always believed was possible. TechVantage was not just surviving. We were becoming what we should have been all along. 6 months passed like a dream I was afraid to wake up from. Fall turned to winter, then winter gave way to an early spring. Portland bloomed with cherry blossoms, and TechVantage bloomed with renewed purpose. The company that had nearly destroyed itself under Jason's corruption was thriving in ways no one had expected. Our transparency during the crisis had become our greatest asset. Clients trusted us more than ever because we had proven we would tell the truth even when it hurt. Industry publications wrote case studies about our turnaround. Business schools started using our story as a lesson in corporate governance and ethical recovery. Jason Hartwell was arrested 4 months after his termination. Federal prosecutors charged him with securities fraud, embezzlement, wire fraud, and conspiracy. The evidence was overwhelming. He faced up to 20 years in federal prison. His trial was scheduled for next fall, and his attorneys were already negotiating a plea deal. I would have to testify eventually, but I was not afraid anymore. I had the truth on my side. The 3 corrupt board members, Martin Shaw, Patricia Hendricks, and Tom Ridgefield, reached plea agreements with prosecutors. They repaid the $600,000 they had received, accepted permanent bans from serving on any corporate board, and received probation. Their careers were over, but at least they avoided prison. Marcus Sutherland, the consultant who had planted the malware, fled to a country without an extradition treaty. Interpol issued a warrant for his arrest. He would never work in the American tech industry again, and he would spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder. As for TechVantage itself, the transformation was remarkable. Employee satisfaction scores were the highest in company history. Our anonymous internal surveys showed 94% of staff felt valued and respected. Turnover dropped to nearly 0. Applications for open positions flooded our HR department because word spread that we were a company that actually cared about its people. The profit-sharing program distributed $2.3 million to employees in the first quarter alone. Junior developers who had been living paycheck to paycheck suddenly had savings accounts. Senior staff could afford down payments on houses. People cried when they saw their profit-sharing checks because they had never worked somewhere that actually shared success. Tanya was thriving as vice president of engineering. She led a team of 50 developers now, and they adored her. She brought an empathy to leadership that the company had been missing for years. She remembered what it was like to be the junior developer, hoping someone would give her a chance. She made sure everyone on her team got that chance. Company revenue actually increased 15% despite the crisis. It turned out that when you remove toxic leadership and empower good people to do their best work, innovation accelerates. We rolled out 3 major platform updates in 6 months. Features our clients had been requesting for years suddenly became reality because developers were not spending all their energy navigating office politics and fear. My 25% equity stake was now worth approximately $225 million based on updated private valuations. The number was so large it did not feel real. I still drove the same car, lived in the same apartment, bought the same groceries, but I slept better at night knowing I would never have to worry about money again, and more importantly, knowing I had earned every dollar. Douglas Brennan was healthy, engaged, and more present than he had been in years. The crisis had woken him up to what he had nearly lost. He attended board meetings regularly, mentored junior executives, and reminded everyone what the company's original mission had been. He told me privately that saving TechVantage had given him a reason to keep living instead of just existing. On a Friday afternoon in early March, Douglas called me to his office. It was the same corner office where Jason had fired me 7 months earlier. The difference was that now I walked in without fear. "Sit down. I need to discuss something with you." He looked serious but not upset. I sat across from him, curious. "We received an acquisition offer. A major tech company wants to buy TechVantage for $1.2 billion. All cash. The offer is legitimate, and the board believes it is fair market value." I felt my heart rate increase. $1.2 billion. My 25% stake would be worth $300 million. Life-changing money. Generational wealth. I could retire at 40 and never worry about anything again. "What do you think we should do?" Douglas smiled slightly. "I am 62 years old, Caitlin. I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. I am ready to retire for real this time. To travel with my wife. To see my grandchildren grow up. But this is not just my company anymore. It is yours too. So I am asking you, what do you think?" I stood up and walked to the window. The same view Jason had looked at when he plotted his schemes. The same view that had witnessed so much pain and betrayal. But now it felt different. The city stretched out below me, alive with possibility. I thought about my 23-year-old self, coding alone in that tiny apartment, dreaming of building something meaningful. I thought about the 17 years of loyalty that had nearly broken me. I thought about the moment I chose to fight back instead of disappear. And I thought about what TechVantage had become over the last 6 months. Not just a company, but proof that doing things right could actually work. Proof that you could be successful without destroying people. Proof that transparency and respect were not weaknesses but strengths. "Douglas, what do you want TechVantage's legacy to be?" He stood up and joined me at the window. "I want it to be proof that companies can succeed while treating people well. I want it to be an example that the next generation can follow." I turned to face him. "Then we do not sell. Not yet. Not while we still have work to do." Douglas studied my face for a long moment, then smiled broadly. "I was hoping you would say that. The truth is, I already told them no. I just wanted to see if success had changed you." I laughed. "You tested me, I did, and you passed." He walked back to his desk and picked up his phone. "Let me show you something else." He pulled up an email and turned the screen toward me. It was from a prominent business magazine requesting an interview. They wanted to feature TechVantage in their annual issue on the most innovative companies in America. Not because of our technology, because of our culture. They want to talk to you specifically about what it means to build a company that values people over profits. About what happened here and how we recovered. About why employee ownership and profit sharing matter. They think your story could inspire other companies to change how they operate. I read the email, feeling something shift inside me. This was bigger than just TechVantage. This was about proving that a different kind of success was possible. I will do the interview, but only if we include stories from other employees. Tanya, James, Rachel, Aiden, everyone who made this work. This was never about one person. Agreed. That evening, I hosted a dinner at my apartment for my core team, the same people who had stayed up all night with me to save the company. We gathered around my small dining table with Thai takeout and craft beer, laughing about inside jokes and celebrating how far we had come. Tanya raised her glass. To Caitlin, who taught us that knowing your worth is not arrogance, it is survival, James added. To refusing to be erased. Rachel smiled. To building something that matters. Aiden, quiet as always, simply said, to doing it right. We clinked glasses. As I looked around at these faces, these people who had become my chosen family, I realized something profound. The real victory was not the equity stake or the title or the vindication. The real victory was this: sitting with people I trusted, people who trusted me, building something we could all be proud of. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I sat on my couch with my laptop and wrote an email to myself. I wanted to document what I had learned, not just for me, but for the version of me that existed 7 months ago, the woman who got fired and felt like her world was ending. I wrote, your value is not determined by how others treat you. When they try to erase your contributions, do not let them rewrite history. Document your work. Know your rights. Never underestimate the power of preparation meeting opportunity. Loyalty should run both ways, and when it does not, you owe loyalty to yourself first. Sometimes the best revenge is not vengeance at all, but building something so undeniably good that it proves your worth to everyone who doubted you. Stay humble. Stay hungry. Stay human. That is how you win. I saved the email as a draft. Maybe someday I would send it to someone who needed to read it. The following Monday morning, I drove to TechVantage headquarters like I had done thousands of times before, but everything felt different now. My parking spot had a sign that read CTO. The lobby receptionist greeted me by name with genuine warmth. I rode the elevator to the executive floor, where my photograph now hung alongside Douglas and the other C-suite members. But I did not stay in my corner office. I never did. I rode the elevator back down to the development floor, walked through the bustling workspace where dozens of developers were solving problems and building features, and sat down at my workstation right in the middle of everything. I opened my laptop, checked the morning system reports, everything running smoothly. 40,000 clients depending on the software I had built 17 years ago. The software that was now protected, valued, and building something better than profit. It was building dignity, purpose, hope. Tanya walked by and dropped a coffee on my desk. Morning, boss. Morning. What are we working on today? New predictive analytics module. The team has some interesting ideas about machine learning integration. Let me see. She pulled up a chair, and we dove into code together. Just like always. Just like it should be, because that is who I was. Not someone who let power change them, not someone who forgot where they came from, but someone who remembered that the work mattered more than the title, that the team mattered more than the glory, that building something meaningful required staying connected to the people doing the building. I smiled and started typing. The cursor blinked on the screen, waiting for input, just like it had 17 years ago in that tiny apartment. This was just the beginning. There were companies to serve, employees to support, an industry to change. There were young women out there right now, sitting in their own tiny apartments, building the next great thing, hoping someone would give them a chance. I was going to make sure they got that chance, and I was going to make sure they knew their worth before someone tried to take it from them. That was my legacy. Not the equity or the title or the money, but the knowledge that I had fought back, won, and then used that victory to build something better. The software hummed along, serving clients across the country. The office buzzed with productive energy, and I got to work, because there was always more to build, always more to prove, always more people who deserved a chance. I was Caitlin Harper. I owned my work. I knew my worth, and I was just getting started. Now I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt invisible at work? Like your contributions did not matter? Have you ever been told you were disposable when you knew you were essential? Drop a comment and share your story. You are not alone. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button so more people can find it. Subscribe to hear more stories about people who refuse to be erased. And share this with someone who needs to remember their own worth today. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminded you that you are valuable, you are essential, and you deserve to be treated that way. Keep fighting for what you have built, keep knowing your worth, and never, ever let anyone erase you. Take care of yourself, and I will see you in the next story.